folks, Rob Dreemeyer here. Welcome to Broadway Barfly. If you're a theater fan who loves a great cocktail, click that subscribe button because Broadway Barfly is the channel for you. Alan J. Lerner and Frederick Loewe were one of Broadway's most celebrated songwriting teams. Their first show together was in 1942. It was a musical called Life of the Party, and it played at a stock theater in Detroit. Their first Broadway musical opened in 1943, and it was titled What's Up? Their second Broadway musical opened in 1945, and it was a show called The Day Before Spring. Now, if you've never heard of any of these musicals, you're probably not alone, because none of them were especially successful, and for the most part, they've been long forgotten. However, it was their third Broadway musical that opened in 1947 that gave them their first big hit, and that show was Brigadoon. Brigadoon is about a mythical village in the Highlands of Scotland that comes to life for only one day every 100 years. At the beginning of the story, we see two American hunters, Tommy and Jeff, who are lost in the Scottish Highlands, and they happen to stumble upon Brigadoon on this one day that it's come to life. It's a very special day in Brigadoon because they're preparing for the wedding of Jean McLaren and Charlie Dalrymple. There's another young man in town named Harry Beaton who is consumed with jealousy because he also loves Jean, and now he can't marry the woman he loves, and he's also stuck in a village he cannot leave. Because for any citizen to leave Brigadoon means that the entire village would disappear into the mist forever. Tommy meets Jean's older sister, Fiona, who's all but given up on finding a husband in Brigadoon, and the two immediately fall in love. After a day of romance and pageantry and even some tragedy, Brigadoon once again disappears into the Highland mist. The critics loved Brigadoon, and it was greeted with almost universal rave reviews. They especially loved Agnes de Mille's choreography, which included some beautiful ballets as well as a thrilling sword dance. They also loved Lerner and Loewe's score, which introduced the songs I'll Go Home with Bonnie Jean, The Heather on the Hill, and Almost Like Being in Love. Brigadoon became an instant classic, joining the ranks of other hits of the day, most notably Rodgers and Hammerstein's Oklahoma and Carousel. Over the years, people have come to believe that Brigadoon was based on the 19th century German story Germelshausen that was written by Friedrich Gerstecker. Though that's something that Lerner vehemently denied, he insisted that Brigadoon was an original story. In his autobiography, The Street Where I Live, he writes about the origins of that rumor. During the Broadway run of Brigadoon, he lived at the Royalton Hotel in Manhattan, and one of his fellow residents there was the drama critic George Jean Nathan, who is known to be somewhat of a womanizer. I should point out that Lerner also had a little bit of a womanizing reputation. He was married 8 times in his life. Anyway, as Lerner says in his autobiography, Nathan had a high school crush on Brigadoon's leading lady, and he would frequently take her to supper and woo her with gifts. He would send her copies of his books with affectionate inscriptions. One time, when he called to ask her out, he learned that she was away on a romantic getaway with Lerner, and he became enraged with jealousy. So in his next column, he wrote about Brigadoon, and he accused Lerner of stealing the plot of Brigadoon from this German story. Well, this accusation didn't really do anything to damage Lerner's reputation, nor did it do anything to deter the popularity of Brigadoon. It ran for over a year on Broadway. It was made into the 1954 MGM film that starred Gene Kelly and Sid Charisse. There were multiple studio recordings made of the score. There was a 1966 television movie made that starred Robert Goulet. It enjoyed revivals on Broadway and in the West End, and it's still a perennial favorite in stock and amateur theaters today. Throughout his life, Lerner continued to insist that Brigadoon was an original story, though he did come around to acknowledging he was aware of other folk stories involving enchanted villages. It's sort of interesting to think that Nathan even knew of this obscure German story to compare Brigadoon to, and that by somehow accusing Lerner of borrowing a plot would reflect badly on him. Because surely as a theater critic, he knew that most successful musical shows of the day were based on other material. Showboat, Oklahoma, Carousel are all based on other sources. Even today, pretty much any successful musical one can think of, with very few exceptions, are all based on underlying material. But love makes people do strange things, and we have to look no further than Brigadoon to see that that's the case. After all, Tommy Albright does give up life as he knows it and moves to a village that disappears into the mist. To celebrate Brigadoon, we're going to make a Highlander. There are several cocktails called the Highlander, but the one we're making feels as if it should be an old classic cocktail, sort of the way Brigadoon is an old classic musical. But in fact, it's a fairly new drink. It was created by a bartender based on the West Coast named Paul Harrington, and he published it in his 1998 book called Cocktail, A Drink Bible for the 21st Century. The backstory he gives for the drink is that his dad enjoyed drinking rusty nails, which is a combination of scotch and drambuie, but he personally always found that to be too sweet. There came a time in his career when he was introduced to chartreuse, and this got him interested in mixing cocktails with French liqueurs. So when he came around to wanting to do his own riff on a rusty nail, he pulled another French liqueur off the shelf, which was Benedictine. And after playing around with the ratio and adding some bitters, he came up with a concoction that he really enjoyed, and his Highlander cocktail was born. To make our Highlander, we need scotch, Benedictine, and bitters. You may have noticed that we really don't mix all that many cocktails with scotch. A lot of people prefer to drink their scotch by itself, either neat or on the rocks. True scotch aficionados will tell you it's sacrilege to mix cocktails with scotch, and it's a waste of perfectly good alcohol. I don't know, I'm not a scotch aficionado. I happen to like this cocktail a lot, and I think all of this together makes something where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So we start with a mixing glass of ice, and to that we add 2 ounces of scotch, half an ounce of the Benedictine, and then a couple dashes of the bitters. And we give this a good stir. We serve this in a chilled cocktail glass. And we garnish it with a lemon twist. And there you have a Highlander cocktail. Cheers! If you enjoyed the video, why not give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends? Feel free to leave your comments and click that subscribe button because there's a lot more Broadway Barfly to come.